is that Nodirbek has what it takes, and surely even the tiniest fraction of Magnus Carlsen's mind must agree with that, must acknowledge that at the very least.
Definitely. There's always hope, even when you play a giant of the game, and Nodirbek has done it before. This game does begin pawn opening. Magnus Carlsen goes for, okay, it's branch of the Queen's Gambit declined. A transposition here. Magnus, will he bring out his bishop? No, he trades pawns. And a very classical start to this game. In strategic waters, he should be a heavy favourite against Nodirbek. If it becomes more dynamic, anyone's game.
The traditional line, millions of games have been played in this opening setup. As the bishop comes out eventually, for Magnus it will be about opening up diagonals for his light squared bishop. Meanwhile, for Nodirbek, he will try to reroute the knight from the left flank towards the right side of the board. He first takes out his own bishop. This particular approach by Nodirbek does invite some potential complications. The g-pawn pushing forward could be ambitious play. We're about to find out Magnus's mindset.
Yeah, and Magnus is known as the leading expert in this pawn structure, mainly from the black side, but interesting to see him kind of flip the board here, take it from the white side, happy to just set up this very solid structure. Here we see a trade of bishops. It's a pawn sacrifice for Magnus Carlsen, but do not take that pawn. The black queen taking on b2 would only be met by the white rook sliding across, and white would regain the pawn, the rook on b7, with a lot of interest.
And Nodirbek does realize that he keeps things under control, brings his own knight into the game. Magnus still ignoring the b2 pawn hanging. Now he finally does draw back with the queen, defends it. Nodirbek advances with a flank side attack, trying to gain more space on the queen side.
So let's talk some of the ideas in this position, in this kind of pawn structure. We mentioned already the possibility of the g-pawn marching up the board. Now that we've castled kingside, does that make that significant? Or is that actually still a feature? Are we playing things like king h2 and then proceeding with the plan? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think it makes it less likely, at least in the near future, pushing pawns in front of your own king while queens exist. A bit risky, but more likely here, Magnus Carlsen first relocating his knights. He wants to play on the queen side, that flank the queens sit on. You can go for what they call a minority attack. White has two pawns, the A and B. Black has a lot more pawns there. You can try and trade off, isolate some of your enemy pawns, and create some targets for your pieces a bit later. For now, though, it just looks like pure maneuvering. Both sides setting up their rooks, getting ready. The white queen dropping back, very mysterious. But I think we'll see the status quo maintained for the next 15-20 moves, and then the fire be unleashed.
And what about if you're playing with the black pieces here, Tanya? Are there any particular, I don't know, outposts or pawn advances that could be committal or anything of the sort that you're particularly watching out for?
Well, this is the minority attack that David was earlier implying about, right? Magnus using his two pawns on that queen's flank to get those open lines in. You mentioned outpost. If you're allowed to breathe fire down, Magnus will use that knight and jump to the c5 square.
Yep.
Any trades would open up some lines in favor of Magnus. We see some pawn trades here. The rook was attacking the queen moves, and look.
the checks, but ultimately will not be able to stem the tide. The white rook is going to be so effective here at cleaning up the black pawns, which are separated and isolated.
Nodirbek also completely in disbelief. He just keeps shaking his head. A position totally in control for the black pieces, for Nodirbek. Played a beautiful game, really. You know, kept everything intact. The knight, rook, playing brilliantly, and then suddenly out of nowhere, he's getting checkmated, has to give up his rook. He can give a few more checks, but that's really not going to help. Magnus can decide to centralize his king. That look from Nodirbek is one of a player giving up. He realizes there's barely anything to fight for. You pick up that pawn that's on the left side, put it closer to the H pawn. Yes, you can play on. But right now, with the pawns just being so far apart, one of them about to fall, I think Nodirbek's about to fall.
Tell from the body language. Well, they're surprisingly stone cold, 88 BPM on heart rate. It's lower than Magnus's at the moment. Unbelievably fit. But unfortunately, you can't say the same for the position. So right now, things looking like they are collapsing for Nodirbek, almost reliant on an extremely rare and uncharacteristic blunder from Magnus. I think this is going to be 1-0 very, very shortly.
Landing some knight forks there was Nodirbek's goal. Be careful of the black knight jumping back with a check so he keeps his rook and king on opposite colour complexes. That's how to avoid knight forks. If you keep one piece on the light square, one piece on the dark square, they can't get hit simultaneously, and black knight now has to give way. The black c-port dropping and not.
Wow, absolutely fantastic stuff from Magnus. Was it a vintage Magnus grind?